Mayors, chairs, commissioners, good afternoon. I'm Herb Marlowe, and my job today is to facilitate this meeting, which we'll see how challenging and interesting it's going to be. So I'd like to thank each of you for your time today. And we're going to just walk through this PowerPoint, and there'll be a lot of discussion at the various points in there. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with each of you ahead of time to review this, and so looking forward to discussion. Let me start with the first slide, because we've actually spent a lot of time talking about that slide. We have given you a name for the moment of the Policy Leadership Group. Let me explain why. It's obviously your prerogative to change that at any point that you wish to. But basically, your role here is to really set a strategy for the future about transportation and how that's related to the economic growth and development of the community. And that truly is policy leadership. And so that's why we chose that term. What we really are talking about is transportation strategy here. And that really is the direction and the context that you want to set for the transportation system of this community. And it provides the context for all the folks who are doing various forms of planning and looking at specific projects. But y'all are really going to set the context here if you choose to go forward with this project. So that's why we're using the term transportation strategy. We want it to result in job growth. So there is a focus to this, and the reason that focus is there is because we believe that job growth is really critical to the quality of life of the future and the quality of communities. Jim Clifton is the president of Gallup, and he wrote a book called The Coming Jobs War, which is based around all their research, not just surveys, but the work they do for governments and corporations. And his contention is there are certain communities that are well prepared and are going to attract jobs, and then those are not. And those that attract jobs continue to attract better and better jobs, and those that are not go the other way. So y'all are all committed to making this a very high quality community and one that grows, and so that's why our focus is here on job growth. So that's the rationale for the words on the screen there. We discussed 4 guiding principles. I'm going to review them quickly, and then I'm going to ask for some form of endorsement. Nonverbals will be fine, but I want to make sure we're okay. For purposes of this discussion, all seats at the table are equal. All solutions are on the table, but none are pre-selected. And I do want to emphasize that. We'll put every solution there, but there's no bias today about a particular solution. That will work itself out over time, but we are not coming here with any particular solution agenda. You're all willing to put skin in the game. That translates into dollars, just to be sure. And that's a particular reason why the 11 of you are sitting here, because you represent the 5 entities in this county that have the capacity to tax or create revenues for transportation locally. Obviously, FDOT has its own sources. All the other entities have the capacity to plan, to bring perspective, et cetera, but it's only these 5 entities that really can create the funding to do this locally. So that's the reason and rationale for the 11 of you sitting here. And our first goal is to find solutions that really create value for the community, as opposed to finding funding sources and trying how to figure out how to spend it. So what we're working to do and what we'll work on, should you choose to go forward, is the solutions. And then we'll turn to, once you've chosen those solutions, how to make those work. We want to acknowledge that trying to build a quality community, an economically vibrant community, has a lot of features to it. And if you look at the outside circle there, the sort of orange gold one, climate, geography, those are things you're given. You've got great natural advantages here, and you certainly want to use them. And that gives you a competitive advantage. Schools, parks, healthcare, other quality of life features are all important to economic development, and we acknowledge that, and people are obviously trying to make impacts on those. Suppliers and workforce are also very critical, and at this particular moment, your economic development folks tell me your workforce is really your most critical challenge at this particular moment. But we want to acknowledge that is part of trying to build a competitive advantage, which I'll talk about later. Then regulations, sites, incentive, all those things help economic development occur. Hi, Commissioner, you're right here. But at the center of it, for purposes of this discussion, is transportation. And so we are not trying to solve all these other issues here. We're trying to focus on one particular issue, which is transportation. And the question before you is how do you build a transportation network here, a transportation system, that's really going to lead to good quality job growth that you want to have. So that's really the question we're trying to answer in this process. If you just reiterated that on the next slide, we're asking you to do three things: to develop a transportation strategy that's going to create job growth. Develop a transportation strategy that's going to create competitive advantage. And by that I mean advantages to your businesses, in the sense that they can move product and people better, faster, quicker, et cetera. And advantages to residents, so they can access services, get to work, et cetera. So we're trying to do both quality of life and business competitiveness. And then finally, we're going to ask you to develop implementation options. How would you actually move this forward? And there may be some governance issues you may want to talk about, and various funding options. So those are the purposes of this body. Would like to talk for a moment just about what's distinctive about it. My understanding is for the first time, all 4 local governments are developing comprehensive plans simultaneously. At the same time, you have the long-range transportation plan being developed. So this is an opportunity for you, as the red circle there, to really drive a lot of those contexts, to provide a context for both the comp planning and the long-range transportation planning, so that your work here has a lot of impact in terms of the planning efforts that are going on in the community. Will provide some sense of direction, some sense of priority, some set of context. And my understanding, that has never yet occurred in this county. If I'm wrong, I certainly stand to be corrected, but I'll make the statement right now. So it is a very distinctive effort and an opportune time for y'all to do that. Having talked for a moment, I'd really like to hear from y'all for a moment about sort of outcomes and deliverables, expectations, what you have of this project. And if you will just give me a wave, we'll start the discussion however. But I'd like to hear from you in terms of what do you expect, what do you want us to produce here at the end. Commissioner Beckner.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I think has always been part of the challenge when we're talking about transportation, especially since now that everybody's here at the table, is I think we need to really define what are the transportation challenges that we have in unincorporated in the different municipalities. Okay. So I would really like to see what are the challenges that each area face, and so we can clearly define what the problem is. That's one of the things that I would certainly like to see.
So a very clear problem definition can be defined as challenges, but that's one thing you'd like to see out of the process. Okay. Anyone else? Commissioner Merman?
I'd like to see the corridors be more defined.
Okay.
About based on what our needs are and where our growth is and what the best, I guess, the best corridors for where people live, so that they can, get to work or, play. Whether, sorry, we haven't pressed the button. Sorry. Okay. And then prioritize those.
Okay. All right. So really defining the corridors, understanding the corridors, how they actually are functioning, and how they may need to function, and some prioritization of the corridor.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Chris.
Look at new and innovative ways to raise capital to fund it.
Okay.
Because, the current gas tax that we use is becoming antiquated as there are shorter and fewer trips and, less fuel consumption based on more fuel-efficient vehicles. So, what should we really be doing and how should we be doing it? I mean, I think we need to also take a look at that issue.
Okay.
In addition, I think we need to take a look at what has been previous priorities, and every couple of years reshuffle that deck.
Okay.
Because this is a whole different board than was here 5 years ago, and those priorities may be dinosaurs by now, and there could be different priorities set by a different board.
Okay. All right. So really 2 items. One, let's look at new, innovative, different funding mechanisms. What's all out there, what's being used, what's being talked about.
Yes. And
let's relook at the priorities of stuff in this process to set your own priorities as we go through it.
Well, look ahead based on today's needs and what we see tomorrow's needs being, because sometimes those needs change and evolve.
Okay. All right. Sure, David.
I think at one point we're going to have to sort through what is achievable and what isn't achievable, because we have so many plans out there now that you've got a public that's really confused. They hear one mode being proposed, they hear another mode being proposed, they hear different costs. I think ultimately, regardless of what kind of funding formula is arrived at, we're going to have to go to the public for support for that. So I think we've got to clarify not only for the governmental entities, but I think we've got to clarify for the general public what's doable and what we ought to just discard.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's have a very realistic discussion about what can be done here and communicate that publicly. Okay. Mr.
Having
Miller.
said that, I think we're going to have to back up and come to realization, are we going to try to build our way out of this transportation situation we're in? I mean, we can't continue to just build roads at the cost that today's prices are for the roads. Plus the fact, by the time we either build a road or by the time we even try to bring a road up to standard, that standard has evolved back into the worst case scenario it was before. So I think we as a group would have to decide, do we really want to build our way out of the situation before we go talk to the public? Or is there something else we want to look at down the road?
Okay.
That's how we meet those needs.
So building upon the chair's comments there, we've got to look at the realistic aspects, and can you actually build your way out of it, or what are your other options to do that? Okay. Mr. Beck?
And building upon that, obviously, once we have identified what the challenges are in the different area and have developed the overall comprehensive strategy, obviously looking at the options for solutions. And so, we have spent an awful lot of time and money over the years on providing different solutions. So this is an opportunity, I think, that we can bring all those together.
Okay.
As we look in the different areas, and then if there are some areas where we have never looked at solutions, then obviously we can identify those and start identifying what the appropriate solutions and options might be for
Okay.
each.
All right. So somewhere I laid Commissioner Chris, let's relook at our solutions and see if there's a different set of priorities, different set of stuff. Is there anyone else? Commissioner Chris?
One more point, connectivity. If the mayor of any one of the cities, in reshuffling their deck of priorities, decides to put a focus on certain corridors, the county, we should be willing to sit down and try to work to connect with that so that there's good continuance of flow.
Okay.
And, and then again, that goes back to, building the relationships and maintaining those relationships with our municipalities, but also making sure that we also have that connectivity with our neighbors, which are surrounding cities and counties outside our jurisdiction.
Okay, all right. So connectivity both here locally, which is why we certainly appreciate the three mayors being here so that we can have those discussions. And then the larger connectivity issue of folks around you who are maybe sending a lot of stuff your way. So, Commissioner Sharp.
One thing, I think everyone's pretty much touched on some of the concerns that I had, but to be specific without trying to drive towards one area, Clifton's book talks about what drives the jobs war. He mentions the airport, he talks about your downtown. So it seems to me that while we're talking about what we might be able to do, we do know that they're right now proceeding with a series of projects in the West Shore area that, in my mind, it's not but it's one of the important drivers, and we need to make sure that we're having a conversation so that whatever assistance they might need, we could provide to help drive.
Absolutely, and I'll talk in a few moments about how we propose to plan to do that. Commissioner Miller, yes, sir.
Tell the mayors I know they're in a county building, but they can talk. Speak up.
Okay, mayors, you're in a county building, you can talk, okay?
Be differential. Speak up here.
Speak up or forever hold your peace.
That's not likely.
Okay, so we got a ground rule here. All right. Anybody else like to make any comments? Okay, I failed, so I moved my slides too quickly. So remember those guiding principles? Are we okay with them? Please speak up or hold your peace. Okay. Okay, I'm going to assume that's an affirmative statement here of silence, all right. Okay, well, we've obviously been making notes about those outcomes and deliverables, and we'll share those back to you. I want to go through some of the assumptions or premises that we're making here, and again, if you think they're in error or you wish me to elaborate on them, please say so. One is that, and these are the four, I'm going to shift to each, I have a slide for each one. One premise is that the existing dollars for transportation are limited. You just have limited capital funds at the moment. What we're trying to say through this little graphic here is, if you look at the red, the investments, they're limited. So you've got to use those very strategically and very smartly. And what we want to use them for is to increase the blue, whatever it is, hexagon, for flow, to keep movement of people and product and information. Okay? And our belief is if you can use those and get better flow, that's going to help job growth. If we get good job growth, there are a lot of benefits to growing jobs, from local services, et cetera, and that will loop back into more dollars for investments. So essentially what we're trying to create here is a virtuous cycle, where we do good and we keep doing good and we do better, as opposed to a negative cycle or a destructive cycle. So that's our one assumption here, is we've got limited funds, so we've got to be pretty smart about where to use them. Okay? I'll move on. Please wave if you want me to stop. Second assumption here is the whole thing of competitive advantage. We want to build competitive advantage for the municipalities here, for the county. And your businesses can gain competitive advantage through being more productive, more efficient. Let me tell you a quick story, or a fact that Ron Barton told me from his work in Jacksonville. They have corporations there who have multiple sites around the nation, and they compare their sites in terms of how productive they are, how efficient they are, quality of customer service, quality of work, all those things. And the sites in Jacksonville tend to come out on top consistently about that, which obviously is a great selling point for Jacksonville. Ron's further analysis of that is a lot of it had to do with the fact that people could get to those sites to work fairly easily. They didn't have an hour-and-a-half commute. They didn't have to wind up being tired or frustrated when they got there. And they could run out over lunch to do errands if they needed to. So you had a workforce that, felt pretty good. And that's much of our thesis behind this. If we can create transportation systems and flow systems so that people can get there and do their work well, do good quality work, et cetera, that creates your local businesses and have a competitive advantage. If they have a competitive advantage, then you as a county as a whole have a competitive advantage. So that's our second assumption that we're working on there. Our third assumption is that when we talk about job growth, there's really a certain specific job area we want to focus on. And I'm going to walk you through this one, if I may. The numbers on the right, these are just purely illustrative numbers. And that's particularly for Bonnie, who is bothered by illustrative numbers. And there's the number of jobs, okay? Now, you see the blue, they're all the same size. And those are 3 different industry types. And for this purpose, I said they each create 10,000 jobs. If you look at the orange, that's their multiplier factor. So the one on the left is a low multiplier. For every job you get there, you also get another half job. So in total, that type of industry creates 15,000 jobs. Look in the middle, that's a moderate multiplier. For every job that you get in the blue, you get 1 additional job in the orange, and that totals to 20,000 jobs. On the right, you get a high multiplier, and that's a multiplier of 3. For every job you create there, you get 2 additional jobs. So you get a total of 30,000 jobs. So there's a significant difference in the total number of jobs created depending upon the industry sector that you go at. Now the good news for y'all is many of your target industries happen to be high multipliers. And the reality is I used a fairly low number here. You find jobs that are 4 and 5 multipliers. So by focusing, our theory is, and our assumption is, by focusing on these type of jobs, you're going to create a lot more jobs in the community. And those jobs are spread out everywhere. While a specific business may be in a specific industrial park, those jobs go throughout the county and the region. So there's benefit to everybody for this. And we believe this is the most strategic use of your resources, to focus on those type jobs. And our last premise is what we call key economic spaces. I want to talk about this for a moment. At one level, these are really obvious around. USF, Temple Terrace, Bush is a key economic space. Downtown's a key economic space. West Shore Airport's a key economic space. Plant City I-4 is one. Port's one. So some of these are very obvious, and it's where there's lots of offices and buildings and work. But as you look forward to the future here, and as you're trying to look out 10 and 20 and 30 years, there may be other key economic spaces that need to be developed or can develop in this county. So we're not limiting ourselves just to today. But when I use that term, that's all I mean by it, it's a space. And it has several of these, 1 or more of these characteristics. It can be a place where there's a lot of exports. And in that sense, your agricultural lands are a really key economic space, because y'all are a huge exporter of stuff, agricultural. They also are destinations. Folks come to them, visit, have a good time, leave money. You obviously want those folks, so any of your destination spaces are also that. They're lands of concentrated value. You know, if you look at the property values in downtown, for example, they're very high. They're also movement centers, such as a port and airport, can be considered a key economic space. They're places where there are lots of jobs, very dense jobs, and they're places where there are high multiplier jobs. And so this is a large part of our analysis of trying to understand these spaces, what number of jobs are in there, what future jobs potential may be, what types of industries may be attracted to them, what may happen to them in terms of residential capacity or density. So we really want to understand these spaces. Now what's also important to understand is the work here that you're doing on a simultaneous track. Ron Barton is developing the data for the economic development areas, okay? And that data will inform this, and your discussion will inform Ron. And at the end of our discussion here, which we're proposing this summer and fall, Ron will also at that point be able to bring forth the proposed economic development area. So we are really coordinated on that, and we're talking in many cases the very same spaces. But because that's a little more formal process and there's some features on it, we didn't want to call this EDAs to not confuse the process. So we're talking about key economic spaces. But this is a significant assumption here. There are certain spaces in the county that's really where it's valuable to make your investments because you're going to get a lot out of them. And so again, we're trying to be strategic with the limited investment dollars and infrastructure dollars, and our assumption is these are the best places right now to put those. We'll test that out and discuss that in the process. So those are our assumptions. Any feedback from me on the assumptions? Yes, sir.
The only thing, I think we touched upon this when we met her. I fully understand and obviously support that part of the outcome that you want to get from a comprehensive transportation network is job growth. And we talked about perhaps the inherency that obviously the first goal is to create a world-class transportation system to be able to help all of our citizens move from point A to point B. So when we're looking at the density, I just think obviously I hope that part of the consideration is also population density, because we talked about that's been the challenges before with some of the modes of the transportation we were considering. And so I would hope that we're also part of the goal of this is to move people from A to B.
Absolutely, because you've got to move people from A to B for work, for services.
For all reasons, not just jobs, but for whatever reasons they need to travel.
And part of what we want to look at in terms of the key economic space is what is the residential development density may be. One of the challenges that Mayor Buckhorn has, and one of the things that all downtowns have, is there's a transition going on where there, in addition to just being you come in, a lot of people live there now. So you're starting to look at downtowns in different ways than we have in the past. They're not simply job centers, they're job workplace centers. And that has an impact on your transportation capacity. So yes, sir, we've got to think all that through. All right. And this last slide is just conclude. Why do we believe that focusing on jobs is good? Because it really, in terms of the public sector, as the community becomes wealthier, there's less need for some forms of public assistance and support. There's less sort of behaviors that you have to deal with. So there's a benefit to the community and to public service as a whole from this focus. What I'd like to do, ladies and gentlemen, is now talk about our plan for this project and get your feedback in terms of whether this is appropriate working plan for you. We're really proposing 3 phases here, and I'm going to go to the next slide to really talk about them, but we're talking a 3-prong. If we look at phase 1, that's really what we call job and business growth. And what we're trying to determine here is what is the need. Okay? This is, we're just trying to understand what's the need here, transportation needs. Inside these key economic spaces for them to work, between them for to connect to, and larger connections from where people work and live and need to get to services. So we're trying to understand the need here first. And we're proposing to do that no later than the end of this year. Now, my calendar here is sort of a drop-dead calendar. We need to make these dates. Y'all may wish to move them up, and I'll talk with you about that in a moment. But we need to have this. What we also want to do in this phase 1 is as we talk to a variety of people, we want to understand any near-term accomplishments. Anything that we can do that may not be an multi-million-dollar effort, but it just could be done, it would make some difference, it would help. So we want to understand those, and we'll bring those to you as we hear them. We've tried to do phase one so that it's completed in time for the comprehensive plan to be able to move forward. So that's why we want to try and get this done no later than December, is our proposed schedule. Phase two, remember phase one's a need. Phase two is what are the solutions? Okay. And again, I remind you, we have not pre-selected any solutions. We're going to look at them all, and we want to look at talk to you about those solutions, what they cost, what their benefits are, so that you can make a very business case analysis for these solutions. And so we want to begin that no later than January. And we've allowed a year for it here. We're here to serve you, and if y'all want to move faster, we certainly will do that. But we want to try and do that in timing so that at least this work is done with respect to the long-range transportation plan. So phase two is, again, what are the solutions? What are the costs? What are the benefits of those solutions? Phase three is all the various ways that we could fund those solutions. And we're going to give you a menu of that for that. But before I move to some further description of those, if there's any feedback from me on this time frame, is this reasonable to whatever?
I think it's too long.
Too long, okay.
I mean, you know, my experience with phases this long is that means it's probably to be longer. If you do a little bit shorter time frame, then at least you have a little bit of flexibility to work with. If you need to, you know, either it motivates you to want to get things done quicker.
Okay. All right.
And I think we need motivation, quite frankly. So I guess, I mean, I'd like to see more of a 6-month time frame for each phase. Oh, sorry. Well, I'd like to see more of a 6-month time frame for each phase, realizing that, yes, it may take a little bit longer, but at least we're not looking at 3 years. We're only looking at like 18 months.
Okay. Any comments, feedbacks by anybody here?
I'm with Commissioner Merman.
Okay.
I'd like to, my hope is that we, with all the studies that we've done, the analysis that's been completed, that, and if we can come up with a common consensus amongst all the different municipal partners in the county as to what we can at least get started with. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other issues that we probably would take much more time to vet, new technologies that might come along that could perhaps change the direction of what we might want to use, but I still think that we need to get started. I'm concerned that if you're in you started with the jobs war, McClellan liked to just sit around and march in circles and not get out there and fight. I would prefer that we get going.
Okay. Anybody have any stronger opinions? We're certainly willing to try to work on a 6-month schedule, since you give us a little bit of wiggle room there in case we don't make it. So we can certainly attempt the 666, and if y'all will be the driver of that.
Maybe even 6-7.
Okay, a 667. Sorry.
I wasn't quite thinking that way.
Okay, it's your proposal, Commissioner. All right. We'll try for a 667. How about that? Mr. Chairman.
I mean, I agree in theory of trying to move forward with the plans that we've already established and all the work that we've already accomplished. However, I think we need to be strategic at the same time and recognize the fact that it is going to take some time in order to formulate our economic development strategy, at least with respect to the county and how we are establishing a new paradigm, if you will, and that we're aligning transportation improvements with our economic development goals. I don't think internally staff has determined how or when we're going to accomplish that. And I think that's going to play a key role in how we're going to move forward in this process. You couple that with the fact that the long-range transportation plan and comp plans are not going to be finished until whatever date that is. So I'm all for moving in an expeditious manner. However, we have to recognize the other elements that are out there and work accordingly with them.
Okay. And I believe that's consistent with what you're saying, Commissioner Murphy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Exactly what I said.
We'll try and move forward as fast as we can, but recognizing lots of moving pieces to put together here, and y'all will ultimately say, okay, we're done, or we're not done yet. So, okay. I just want to talk about, there are really two major topics we're going to discuss in phase one, and I just want to review them with you very quickly. The first guidance we really, and it's not like the next meeting you make this decision, but we really begin the discussion in depth and all, is what's really the major development pattern you want for the growth of business in this county. And there are really three major scenarios that the Planning Commission is looking at this stage. On the left, one on the left, and these are intentionally small enough so that nobody can try to pick out a road and say what's happening there, is a fairly broadly distributed pattern, pretty much historically as you've done. So we're not trying to concentrate anything too much, it's just sort of kind of there. In the middle is a growth and development pattern that focuses primarily on the redevelopment and extension and greater density of the existing key economic areas. On the right is a model that does that, plus has a lot of development along the interstate corridors. And so the discussion that we'll want to have with you is the pros and cons of each of these, what sort of makes sense to you. The Planning Commission is working on data, so that you have some data about that. What do they cost in terms of infrastructure, all that sort of information. So our first discussion is really around this, and this is an important discussion because, one, it shapes much of the work the Planning Commission will do. It also sort of determines the number of key economic spaces. If you decide to concentrate in Model 2, there are fewer key economic spaces. If you decide Model 3 is where you want, there are a lot more we have to deal with. If you decide Model 1, then we have a different way to think about that. So it's important direction that you provide to us in terms of how to go think about this and how to do the analysis for the key economic spaces, which ultimately lead to the EDAs. So this is the first discussion. Just so you be aware, the Planning Commission is beginning a public discussion about these, so they'll be able to tell you how the public sees, and they're going to be using some pretty innovative web technologies, which in other communities have gotten 15 to 20,000 people to participate. So we should have a lot of very interesting data about that as we move to that discussion. So that's part of the phase one discussion. The other part is really about the key economic spaces. And again, those we need to really drill down and understand what's making those spaces work now, what's their potential, what could develop there, what are going to be the transportation demands when we do that, how might they develop, all those sort of things. And I've named sort of the existing ones, and in the process, depending on our discussion of the prior slide, we'll look at additional areas. But we really need to understand those spaces and what could occur. And this is where, Commissioner Brackner, we really get to this sort of need discussion. What do we need here to make these things work? So that's the real first substantive discussions we'll have as we begin the first meetings with you. As we move to phase two, this is just a sort of example slide here that shows some flows, but really what we've got to understand in phase two is what are the transportation flows in the county and where are people coming from? You have about 200,000 people who come in outside the county to work here every day. So we've got to understand it not from just the county boundaries, but from a broader perspective and what may come in the future. And so we'll have to do a lot of these models for you and all to show you the flows. At the same time, that starts to move to what are the solutions for these various flows, and can you, as Commissioner Miller said, build your way out through more roads, or can you not? What are the other solutions there? And what are those solutions going to cost, and what do we believe those benefits will be? So this is a pretty involved analysis, frankly. We believe there's a lot of work, but again, we're reframing it in a different way than we have in the past, so there's good to be due. When we get to phase three, what we're going to present you with is for every key economic space a set of funding tools. Now, some may be very specific to that space and may only apply to it. Others may apply to every space. But what we want to give you is as many tools as you can, both existing and, Commissioner Chris, new, innovative. Somebody's thinking about it. We ought to think about it here. So we want to do that. We are not going to bring you simply one solution. We'll bring you multiple solutions. And then we've just got to work through which of those you think work. Some of those solutions will help movement within those spaces. Some will help movement between the spaces. Some will help people move around the county for a variety of reasons. So, you know, we've got a lot of analysis to do there and do it, but that's the content of our discussion once we reach phase 3. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay. Now I'd like to talk to you about how we're proposing to organize the project. Left-hand column, top policy leadership group. I'm looking at you. And you're, again, as I said at the start, the reason you're sitting here is you represent the 5 local transportation taxing authorities. You're the 5 local entities that can create revenue streams. We acknowledge that both ports can create their own dollars for their campuses and connectivity, but they can't build networks in the same way you build networks. So that's why we feel you're here. You got a lot of planning entities here that are providing useful and very important perspectives, and certainly they will be here to respond as you want them, as you have questions, as you need their input, and we'll certainly be working with them at the staff level to make sure we're coordinated and all. But so that's the left-hand column and the rationale for why people are sitting where they are. The right-hand's technical advisor group is simply staff who actually do the number crunching and the research and all those things that have to be done. And I'd just like to pause for a moment and thank the many staff from the county and the Planning Commission who've done so much work just to get here today. They have done an enormous amount of work, and I certainly appreciate the efforts that they've done. And everybody's been very supportive, very cooperative. We've met with staffs of the 3 cities and the same sort of stuff, very supportive. We've met with the staff of HART and all that. So at the staff level, there's a lot of cooperation and willingness to work on this. So, yes, sir.
All right, on the structure.
Yes, sir.
How's that for HTV? You got it? On the structure.
Yes, sir.
We had the discussion, and I expressed my concern, and I believe I stated on record that this effort would go nowhere if we didn't have the public engagement, and we've got to have that.
Okay.
These meetings that the other folks are going to have, are they going to be closed to the public?
Well, let me make sure I understand your
Now, I
commission.
understand staff meetings are one thing,
Right.
but then your policy groups, when they get together and they have meetings, they're going to be open to the public.
Yes, sir.
I just
Public-
want that on
public
record,
meeting,
because there are rumors that these are going to be closed-door meetings, and I understand that they're not. I just wanted us on record that they're open. And on public engagement, could you expand on that a little more?
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to do so. As y'all have communicated to us, engaging the public is very important, and we want to do that, not simply because you've communicated to it, because we believe it's important. This ultimately may be a large community decision here, and so the community needs to be engaged in it, needs to understand it, needs to be informed about it. So for that reason, we're proposing several things. And let me start from the bottom up, just for that. The Planning Commission has engaged this pretty innovative web tool, and that will allow folks who'd like to participate that way to participate. I will tell you, I've looked at a lot of this stuff. This is the most sophisticated one I've ever seen. I mean, it really is very good. And in communities that have used it, and it's used nationally, there's very high public participation. So I think that's one way that people can participate. The second thing we want to do is, because we've got 4 comp plans, long-range transportation plan, and this, it can be very easy to come across as we're disjointed. We've got left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing and all. So we want to develop a communication plan involving all your communication staff so that there's a clear message being sent, consistent message, and people can know about it. And it's involved web-based and all that sort of stuff. But so we want to have a communication plan that really creates a coherent sense of effort. The last thing we want to do is I'd like to be able to hold what I call an open to all interested parties forum. There are a lot of folks in this community who've done various work on various transportation issues and you know, have developed some passion for it, some background in it. And what we want to do is have an open forum, and if we need to do more than one, that's fine, where they can come and they can essentially replicate the discussion you're having. So they'll be able to discuss key economic spaces and what they think are the big growth and development patterns. We'll take that information, we'll share it with you, and we'll do that. But it is designed to truly mirror your conversation so that they can engage in the same level of thoughtful analysis that you're being asked to engage in.
Because if we get to the end of this and the public says they've not been engaged and we've wasted the time of the mayors and the people at this table and all these folks that are in the audience, and I want to see something succeed here, and that's why I just am coming back and reinforcing the importance of the public input and engagement along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And if there's anything else, you'd like us to do, we've also offered each of you, because many of you sit with other commissions or bodies that you're representing here, that we'd be pleased to meet at any time where you'd like them to have briefings or backgrounds or replicate that discussion. We certainly want to do that. Our hope is this can be as broad a discussion in this community as we can make it. So, Sheridan.
How are we going to elicit opinions and constructive help from the business community? I don't really see them here.
Okay. Well, I
If this
include
is
them
all
in-
job and employment driven, I would think we'd want some way to communicate with the business community.
Well, let me tell you how it works in my mind, and if that's not satisfactory or adequate, please tell me. Partially, I see an invitation to the business community to these forums, and if we need to set up a special forum for them, I'll be happy to do that. I know many of the folks you're talking about are busy and don't have time. We also, as we try to do the key economic space analysis, we'll be talking to the business community, because those are the folks who can really understand what might happen in these spaces and what might develop. So our image is we're having a lot of conversations with them. If there's some other form or mechanism you'd like us to use, please just say so. Be happy to do that. And we're assuming you can give us a lot of contacts also. So.
I asked about the web-based interaction, like are you thinking about, I'd really like to see some Facebook, I know even on LinkedIn now they have interactive discussion, sites that you can go to and have discussions. There's just so many things going on in social media. You can have chat rooms that I think would be good. I mean, I just really want to, Commissioner Higginbotham, I want to just engage the public as much as possible so that we're successful.
Commissioner Sharp, can you help facilitate that?
He'll be our Facebook, our Twitter expert.
We'll have special assignments here sooner or later. Well, let me say, the tool that I viewed, and I reviewed it when the firm came and presented it, they have all those connections. They very much are very sophisticated in social media, and their thing is designed where it links very easily, and you can easily communicate with people, like if you pose a question, should we grow here or there, you get a lot of it. So I believe we'll have a lot of that. My conversation with Lori Hudson about the communication plan, all that's there. So I think we'll be using every tool that we have to try to engage people about that. Okay. That's our proposed approach. If you endorse this today, there's a lot of work for staff to start, so this is just fair warning of everybody. We'll be asking people to go, and I've been presumptuous and set the first meeting for next week, so we're assuming we'll move forward on this. So. All right, I'm just about through talking here, so if we're going to get out of school early or not, I'd like to go for final sort of comments, thoughts from everybody, so that any feedback once you've heard this. Commissioner Crist.
I think this is a great step forward. It's certainly not a complete fix, and it's going to be up to us to work out solutions. But it's gotten us all to the table. It's going to open the door for discussions that need to take place on a timely basis. I'm ready to move forward with this. If whatever, Mr. Chairman, who's chairing today? Anybody here?
I'm sort of facilitating.
I was going to say Fran's sitting in the driver's seat. So, but do we need to make a motion to move forward, or?
I'm going to ask you in a moment to each verbally go around and to tell me that. I don't know that we need a formal motion for that.
Well, for me, I'm ready to get started, get to work on this, and I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. All right. Well. let me both go to each of you if you'll ask and tell me if you wish to move forward or not, and any other comments you'd like to make around it, and I'll just go around the table if I may. Commissioner Sharp, I'd like to start with you.
Well, I absolutely think that we should go forward. The one thing that you talked about, public engagement, spent a lot of time talking to college students who are the workforce we're trying to attract. I want to make sure that first we engage young citizens. You've got Emerge, it's part of the chamber, which is young professionals. There are Connect Tampa Bay, which is a new organization, but which is generating a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. Young entrepreneurs at University of Tampa, entrepreneurs at USF. If you talk to them, they're pretty clear. The mayor makes some very, I think, prophetic statements about not wanting to lose, his children went to other cities. We're competing with these cities and trying to attract young workers. The partnership had a retreat a week ago in which we talked about one of the key issues for economic development is a workforce and the young workforce. And so I just want to make sure that as we're moving forward, we're talking to the young professionals who are going to live with what we build. And my sense is that young professionals are much more eager, perhaps, than some of us to move quicker.
Okay.
And so, I don't want to poison the well by trying to push too hard early. I respect everyone's concern about timelines, making sure that we're thorough. But at the same time, I want to just again reiterate, I don't think we have the luxury of waiting too long. But at the same time, and I look at Dr. Paulzine, who would fill an afternoon with many interesting points about my points. I don't want us to move in a way where we perhaps race down a path that over time proves to be ill-advised.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, let's go back to you. Any additional comment?
Yeah, I'm going to refer to the Buckhorn Plan, and that is to look at our youth and the users of tomorrow, because right now we need to be laying the groundwork and developing strategies and putting in place what the users tomorrow are going to be demanding that we have. And so often as elected officials, it's the older voter that gets our ear because they're the more plentiful voter at the poll. Young people have a tendency not to vote, but at this point, what we're going to have tomorrow, we need to start today, because these things take a long time to get going and to bring to fruition. And ultimately, things change, and the younger people today are demanding a different kind of look and feel to their community, and we need to start strategizing for that.
Okay, thank you.
Back to my statement in our first meeting and what I said earlier is that we've got to make sure that the public, those who will be using it in the future, and those who are very concerned about how this is funded and financed, whatever it may be, that they're engaged.
Gotcha. Mayor Sparkman.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure glad that I got to be the first mayor to talk.
It might be a rare moment in the process.
Seeing how I'm the
youngest.
The shyest one. But, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I support this wholeheartedly. As I've told a lot of the county commissioners in different situations, I think our relationship with this county board has been the best that my 20-year experience as a city commissioner has been. We able to work with them. Our staff are working together real good, and the best that I've ever seen there. So, as Mr. Evans said, there's a lot of stuff going on. We need to make sure that we curtail it under one umbrella, and that we need to work together. And there's a lot of things that go on that I see here, or maybe that I would see Tampa Terrace is doing, or the county or city of Tampa. May not necessarily be what I could do, but it may give me an idea of what I can do. And, in my business career, I went out to my competitors or throughout the nation and saw what they were doing. A lot of times I brought some of their ideas and incorporated it into my business, which made my business more successful. So I'm just thrilled to see us all under one umbrella, under one roof. And even though it is downtown county building, I don't mind speaking of. Appreciate being here, and it's not a easy process. It's not a short termer. what we're looking for is to provide for our youth and for people in generations to come and get that ball rolling. And I concur with what Commissioner Hickenbottom said about the public. You know, if it comes necessary for a referendum and something of that magnitude, they've got to be sold on the idea that their tax dollars are going to be going to something very effective. And hopefully under this process that will accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Hay?
No, I would just say, as the chairman of the county's transportation task force that we had several years ago, I wholeheartedly support this group moving forward in this collective fashion. I would just again ask that we are strategic in how we move forward. I think that we're going down parallel tracks with our economic development direction and how we're going to formulate EDAs. I guess in some fashion, this discussion is perhaps a little more analytical and will help facilitate that EDA discussion. But I would just ask that internally that our staff works together to ensure that we're moving forward in the expeditiously, but at the same time in most appropriate fashion.
Okay. And let me just assure you, Mr. Chairman, we certainly have done that to this point and fully intend to. Chair Davitt?
Well, I think I speak for everyone at heart. We're delighted to be a part of this. We feel we're here to serve, and it's very helpful to us to be able to participate at this point as the strategic plan gets built. And we especially appreciate the Commission getting this underway. We know that it's taking up a lot of your staff time and some of your resources, and I think it's really in the best interest of everybody in the county, regardless of what jurisdiction we fall into or whether we even fall into one.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Childer?
Thank you, Herb. It's certainly thank you. It's certainly a privilege to be here at the table with all of our local leaders. I mean, this is something that's not happened in a long time, and as alluded to earlier, the climate right now on the relationships of the different jurisdictions and the governments is unprecedented. I think it's very good. I don't see anybody competing against each other. I see us as united as one right now, and that's the best thing that could be happening for this community. I think it's very smart what you all are doing right now. There's a strategic plan that's being put in place. You're not thinking as you go, you're thinking ahead, put a plan, move forward. As discussed earlier, the more transparent you can be, the better off we are. Inform the public. You need the public buy-in. The last thing you want to do is get way down the road, and when there's inaccurate information, there has to be a person that's put in charge to squash that and say this is not true. Just as Commissioner Higginbotham said, I heard there's going to be meetings that are not going to be public. No, it's not. It's not accurate. It's not true. But publicly, because the media sometimes will run with something like that. In order for it to be successful, we can't rush it. I mean, we don't want to go too slow, but we need to take the time that needs to be put in place. So community buy-in is very, very important, not rush it, and this will give us the competitive advantage to move forward. Lots of things are happening in the county and the cities, and this is just really good times for our community. So certainly we will support it from Temple Terrace and look forward to being a part of it.
Great, thank you. Mayor Beckhorn?
First of all, I'm all in. Secondly, to the Commission, thank you, and thank you for the kind words for convening this group. I think all of us recognize that we are at a unique point in our history as a community, and certainly at a unique point in our relationships, both personally and institutionally. If ever there was a time for this to happen, it's right now. I think the momentum in this community is contagious. I think there is a recognition that we're not settling anymore, and we're not asking for anybody's permission anymore. And I think folks are looking to us to find solutions to problems that clearly exist, that clearly are solvable. There is a cost associated with that, and there is a method And as Mayor Sparkman said, what works in Plant City may not work in the city of Tampa, and conversely, but they're all important, and they all deserve equal discussion. And so I think for us, we absolutely are in on this. I think the climate nationally and the climate in Washington, D.C., certainly in terms of transportation options, will never be better. That's not a political statement. That's just sort of a reality in terms of the funding streams. So I think we need to take advantage of that. And the quicker we move, I think the better we are. Public discussion component of it is absolutely important, because at some point we may have to go to the public and say, these are our options, and this is what it's going to cost. And so, that kind of buy-in is good, but I think people are ready. I mean, I think people are really ready for a serious adult discussion about what our options are. And, it may not be pretty, but it is what it is.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Vice Chair?
Obviously, I approve chairing the Economic Prosperity Committee. Talked a lot about economic development areas, transportation corridors as really the foundation for any discussion to move forward on transportation. I was in Apollo Beach last night giving a speech to a group, and I took all this paperwork thinking I was going to have to defend why we couldn't spend $15 million on doing this street right. And actually they came back to me and said, I'm not sure we want to do that now. If you can make us an economic development area, because we have all this land, so people are starting to think, they're coming around, they're turning the corner about this. They're not just thinking about a small road, they're thinking big picture. And as long as we give them a plan, we give them the data to back up the plan and why we're doing it, I think the community will buy in a lot quicker than what we think. So this is going to be a really great step for us. And thank you all the mayors, for being here and participating. It's critical.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
I want to thank the mayors also, and Fran David and others for being here. As far as I can remember, this is the first time that I can remember that the county commission and the 3 municipality leadership have gotten together to do this. And I support the plan. But one thing I want to make sure of, and that is that every nook and cranny of this county, whether it's any 3 of the cities or our unincorporated area, that every citizen has an opportunity to be involved. We talked about the web-based, but one of the things we got to realize is that there's a vast section of our community that does not have access to computers. They don't have access to computers. The mayor, I know Mayor Buckhorn could tell you that, specifically in the city limits of Tampa, probably some of the rest of them, they just do not have it. In some way, somehow, we've got to figure out a mechanism to get them involved in this, because this transportation aspect is going to affect them probably more than anyone else. And that's important. And we start talking about economic development and bringing jobs here. We're not always going to be talking about the high-end technical jobs that's going to be paying the $75,000 to $100,000 a year. We'll also be talking about some of those lower-level jobs that's going to affect people and the 3 cities and Hillsborough County that will play a major role in how this whole county develops. And I think we got to make sure that we get that message out to them. I hear us talking about we want to move fast, but being quick is not always best. So we better make sure that we plan ourselves and do this thing accurately. I didn't see 3 years up there when I was looking at your figures. Maybe I looked at it wrong. I saw 18 months. And I think that, pardon?
It was to 15, way into 15.
15 what? Yeah.
At the end of 15, it's 2.5 years.
I was saying this is half of 13, so that's a year and a half.
Next year is 14, then we have 15.
Okay. Whatever. All right,
About 2
whatever.
3/4.
Anyway.
We'll move with the deliberate speed.
Anyway, I don't know if quick is always better, but I do understand the fact we can't linger too long in what we have to do. My concern is that every aspect of this community has an opportunity to have a part and a say in what we do. I think when we moved down the road before in some of our transportation decisions, what we tried to do, they weren't, and that's what made us fail.
Okay. And Commissioner, I failed to explain, but let me just say quickly, one of the features of this web-based thing is they put kiosks out in various community sites, so the folks who don't have internet access can get them, and we'll be thinking that through, how to get them out there so that folks can have access who may not have home computers. So, Mr. Beck.
Thank you. And I think all of us have come to realize how important transportation is to our community. And I think I want to underscore community because the issue of transportation is just not an issue that needs to be addressed by the county commission. It requires the entire community to be engaged, all of our municipalities, all of our partners. And being involved with the first referendum, the first discussion around transportation, I think that was the challenge. Everybody felt that transportation was important, but we were operating in our own individual silos. And when it came time to make critical decisions, I don't think everybody was on the same page. And I think our constituents in the community figured that out. And that's part of what was part of their hesitancy of moving forward, is because I don't think that they felt that we were connected as leaders in this community. So this group is, I think it's incumbent that we can drive this process, get the community engaged, and really take the leadership to get a world-class transportation system in our community. When I'm out there, and I'm sure when all of you are out there, everybody's talking about transportation. So my take is that the entire community is blowing the whistle, and it's time as leaders that we get on board and we bring everybody else on board, and we solve this issue of transportation once and for all, and all in the benefit of moving this entire community forward.
Great. Thank you. Well, here 11-0, which I hope many of us feel our sports teams will make this season. So thank you for your time today. We wish you well. We will see you very soon to begin work. Thank you again.